Balaam's sacrifices refused by Ginzberg. On the following morning, Balak took Balaam and brought him upon into the high places of Baal. For Balak was even a greater magician and soothsayer than Balaam, who allowed himself like a blind man to be led by him. He led him to this spot because through his magic lore, he knew that Israel was to suffer a great misfortune upon the heights of Balpia, and he thought it was to be Balaam's curse that would effect this disaster upon them. The relation of these two men to each other was like that between two men, one of whom has a knife in his hand, but does not know what part of the body to strike for slaughter, and the other knows the part of the body, but has no knife. Balak knew the place where disaster awaited Israel, but did not know how it was to be brought about, whereas Balaam knew how evil is conjured up, but did not know the places set for disaster, to which Balak had to lead him. 757. Balaam's superiority over Balak and the other magicians lay in this, that he could accurately determine the moment in which God is wrathful. And it was for this reason that his curse was always effective, because he knew how to curse at the very instant of God's anger. It is true that God is angry for 1 instant every day, to wit, during the 3rd hour of the day, when the kings with crowns upon their head worship the sun, but this moment is of infinitesimally short duration. Fully 85,088 such moments make an hour, so that no mortal save Balaam had ever been able to fix that moment, although this point of time has its outward manifestations in nature. For while it lasts, the cock's comb becomes absolutely white, without even the smallest stripe of red. God's love for Israel, however, is so great that during the time that Balaam prepared to curse Israel, he did not wax angry at all, so that Balaam waited in vain for the moment of wrath. 758. Balaam now tried to obtain God's consent for Israel's curse through sacrifices, and hence bade Balak erect 7 altars upon the high place of Baal, corresponding to the 7 altars that since Adam had been erected by 7 pious men, to wit, Adam, Abel, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses. When the altars had been erected, he said to God, "Why didst thou favor these people, if not for the sacrifice that they offered thee? Were it not better for thee to be adored by 70 nations than by one?" But the Holy Spirit answered, "Better is a dry morsel and quietness therewith, than an house full of sacrifices and strife. Dearer to me is a dry offering of meal than all these many flesh offerings by which thou strivest to stir up strife between me and Israel." Now was Balaam's fate decided, for by his conduct he put himself into direct opposition to God, and hence his destruction was decreed. 759, and from that moment the Holy Spirit of prophecy left him, and he was nothing more than a magician. For Israel's sake, however, God granted him the honor of his revelation, but he did so grudgingly, as one loathes to touch an unclean thing. Hence he would not permit Balaam to come to him, but rather appeared to Balaam. God's different treatment of Balaam and of Moses at the revelation is evident, for whereas the latter betook himself to the sanctuary to hear God's words, the former received God's revelation at any place whatsoever. It characterizes God's attitude toward them. 2 men once knocked at a magnate's door, the one being a friend, who had a request to make, and the other a leprous beggar. The magnate said, "Let my friend enter, but I shall send the beggar's alms to the door that he may not enter and pollute my palace." God called Moses to him, whereas he did not desire Balaam to come to him, but betook himself there. He found Balaam at the 7 altars that he had erected, and said to him, "What doest thou here?" Whereupon Balaam answered, "I have erected for thee as many altars as the 3 fathers of Israel, and I have offered upon them bullocks and rams." God, however, said to him, "Better is a dinner of herbs where love is, than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. Pleasanter to me is the meal of unleavened bread and herbs that the Israelites took in Egypt, than the bullocks that thou offerest out of enmity. O thou knave, if I wished for offerings, I should order Michael and Gabriel to bring them to me. Thou art mistaken if thou believest that I should accept offerings from the nations of the world, for I have vowed a vow to accept such from Israel alone." 761. God thereupon handed him over to an angel who entered and settled in his throat, and would not permit Balaam to speak when he wanted to curse Israel. 762.